Now, the beauty of living in the United States, one of the beauties of living in this country, is if you don't like the way things are going, you can generally just vote the people out who are in charge, right? Making those decisions every couple of years, you get somebody else in there to do something different. But we've learned that over the last few weeks, if you got some guns, a private Facebook group, and the willingness to do a little harm, you can just try and take matters into your own hands.
Federal and state authorities have arrested more than a dozen men accused of plotting to kidnap the governor of Michigan, allegedly planned to snatch Governor Gretchen Whitmer from her vacation home.
Now, just today, the FBI announcing that the same group, these people here, also discussed grabbing Virginia's governor, Ralph Northam. But I want to focus on Governor Whitmer from Michigan for just a second, because ever since she mandated strict COVID-19 closures in her state, she has been the focus of some seriously hateful comments. I mean, just search for a few minutes online. You'll find stuff like this, calling her public enemy #1, or saying she needs to be charged with treason. Lock this woman away. And now's the part where I tell you that these comments are actually about our governor. The same kind of hateful internet chatter directed at Michigan's governor mirror the tweets and Facebook posts aimed at Oregon Governor Kate Brown. And I'm betting that that really doesn't surprise you all that much. After all, the two have a lot in common. I mean, they're both Democrats. They took aggressive stances to prevent COVID-19 from spreading, which led to some people losing their businesses. They're both women. I mean, all things people have honed in on in their various attacks. I mean, if you look at some of the things that people are writing about Governor Brown and Michigan Governor Whitmer, you start to see a lot of patterns: vicious, hateful, oftentimes sexist, and in some cases violent patterns. And now that we have seen what a small group of people are capable of planning, is it really that hard to believe that something like that could potentially happen in Oregon? I mean, look, last year during that big cap and trade fiasco, the Oregon Capitol shut down after leaders received warnings of a possible threat from similar right-wing groups. We've seen this type of ideological politics turn violent many times in our area. How about this over the summer when the right-wing Proud Boys attacked and fought protesters on the steps of the Capitol building? So these discussions about our governor may be hypothetical, but they're certainly not fantasy. And in Michigan and Virginia, they're not either of those things. And it's only thanks to the FBI stopping it that there weren't two American governors being held in some, I don't know, kind of kangaroo court at gunpoint or whatever it is they have planned. I don't know. Look, I know everybody posting on Facebook isn't going to go out and kidnap a governor. But at what point does a comment become a red flag? I asked a guy who studies extremism, PSU professor Randy Blazak.
The things people are discussing, saying, sharing openly have become so extreme given the nature of what this country is going through, the things people are talking about, the rhetoric that's being used all the way from the presidential debates down to the kitchen table. These red flags, I kind of see them every single day based on things that show up in my comment section. How are you to decipher what is a threat and what is just somebody talking and saying something mean or rude?
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there. There's a lot of work to be done from law enforcement. They are going to be working overtime for the next 100 days. And there's a lot of vigilance from the community. And you sort of know in retrospect, but one of the things I always point out is that Jeremy Christian, who was the Max Train stabber in 2017, on his Facebook page had a kind of tribute poem to Timothy McVeigh with a picture of the Oklahoma City bombing building, the federal building, and that he wanted to carry in his footsteps. So that was a red flag right there. And so when we can start having community groups who can monitor extremism, working with law enforcement to kind of break up some of these threats, but you know, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I mean, Timothy McVeigh was a conspiracy of sort of 2 or 3 people that took out 168 people, including 19 children who were in a daycare facility. They are ready to do that. They have justified in their minds massive casualties to save America from what they think of as America's enemy.
You know, when you put it that way, man. And I'll tell you, these fears, and you know, maybe fears, maybe that's too heavy of a word. These concerns, they don't live in a vacuum. On the screen right now, we have this email that Jim from Portland wrote in just a few days ago. Says this: with the possibility of civil unrest after the U.S. election, what are the known militias in Oregon, and what threat do they pose, if any? Now, Blazak says that a lot of groups, you know, like the Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer or the 3 Percenters, on the surface, they come across as just free speech and Second Amendment advocates. But it's underneath that they are deeply rooted in anti-Semitism and sexism, and many are actively arming themselves and preparing for a second American Civil War. Blazak even says some of them think that war is only weeks away.
Should I be concerned as an average citizen about what's going to happen following this election?
I think there's real reason for concern. There's real reason for concern for people who work for the federal government, for example. They live with the specter of Timothy McVeigh all the time, and I think that's amplified now. People that live in places that are seen as signs of the change, which are Portland. Portland has become a symbol of what threat looms for the rest of the country. You know, there's a rhetoric that says, don't let your city or don't let your county or state become Portland, Oregon, because that's a socialist communist nightmare with anarchists running through the streets, smashing windows. And so that threat has been used to mobilize these folks for their armed confrontation.
Well, okay. So I guess we go ahead and bump armed extremists and potential civil war into 2020's growing list of thoughts to have while sleeplessly staring at your ceiling.